I'm Jethro Mullen, head of the IEA's communications team, and I'm joined today by IEA Executive Director, Dr. Fatih Birol, and by our Director of Sustainability, Technology and Outlooks, Laura Cozzi. So this new report, the Global Energy Review, provides the first full picture of supply and demand data for 2024, covering the entire energy sector, all fuels, technologies, regions, and emissions. And the full report is available to read and download freely on our website. During today's event, Dr. Birol will make some opening remarks, and then Laura will present the key findings of the report. We'll then take questions from journalists. For the journalists taking part in this press webinar, we invite you to send your questions via the Q&A function in the Zoom. You can do this at any point during the presentation, and we'll also take a 2-minute break right after the presentation for you to send your questions. And with that, I'll hand over to our Executive Director, Dr. Birol.
Thank you very much, Jethro. Greetings from International Energy Agency headquarters, dear colleagues. Today, we are in front of you with another report, the Global Energy Review 2025 report. This report shows the strengths of the IEA. Our main strength is our data. And we have data at the IEA on all fuels, all technologies, and all countries as far as the energy is concerned. We have data for the oil production by any field in major oil-producing countries, gas consumption in all countries, coal trade, electricity prices, copper mine investments across the energy sector. And this report brings all this data together for the year 2024 and try to make sense. What does it mean for the next years to come, for governments, for energy industry, for academia, and for all decision makers and interested parties? We say at the IEA, data always wins. And in this context where we are in our world today, in the 2025, where there are so many geopolitical uncertainties persist, and where there are so many different narratives on energy, driven by different motivations exist, we believe it is important to have real data and discuss the energy issues based on real objective data. Therefore, I would like to thank my colleague Laura Cozzi and the entire IEA team to bring all this data around the world together to make this GER, as we call it, the Global Energy Review 2024, together. Now, I would like to share a couple of key points when I look at the report, some takeaways, which I thought might be important to underline. The very first one is, dear colleagues, when we look at the numbers, we see global energy demand surges, very strong growth in 2024. It is about 2 times faster than the historical averages. In the last 10 years, global energy demand on average increased about 1%, and now 2024, it increased more than 2 percentage points. Why it is happening? It is happening mainly driven by the economic growth, economic development coming from the emerging and developing countries, which is a usual well-established trend. But also, we see after years and years of decline of energy demand in advanced economies, we see a return to growth, which we have not seen since many years. If we put the COVID years aside for a moment, For example, for the European Union, we see energy demand increase for the first time since the year 2017. And it is, of course, for North America and other parts of the advanced economies. And if you look at a bit further, the numbers, why global energy demand growth is so strong, we see one very clear trend. Electricity growth. Global electricity demand increased 2 times higher than the global energy demand. Now, in our World Energy Outlook, we published last November, we said that even though oil and gas will remain as essential energy carriers, we see the footsteps, we hear the footsteps of the age of electricity coming. And this is yet another example that the energy demand is growing, but the electricity demand increases 2 times higher than the energy demand growth, driven by industrial growth, by air conditioning, the lots of air conditioning, the AI, data centers, and also with the electric cars penetration coming through. So this is pinning the electricity demand growth so strongly around the world. And we also see in our global energy review of the IEA that the big chunk of this electricity demand growth is met by renewables, solar and wind, but also nuclear power. And the rest comes from natural gas and coal. So perhaps one word on renewables, very impressive. Last year, our numbers show about 700 gigawatts of renewable capacity is added to the global electricity fleet. And my colleagues told me that it is the 22 years in a row that renewables are breaking records in terms of their capacity additions. We also see that the nuclear is coming strongly. And again, in our nuclear report this January, we claim, and this report, our Global Energy Review report, once again underlines the very fact that we expect 2025, this year, we will see the highest nuclear electricity generation in the history, the peak of nuclear electricity generation. Dear colleagues, maybe my colleague Laura Cosi will explain more in depth, but I want to mention one more point on the energy demand growth, why it is so strong. In addition to the economic and social structural reasons, there is one other factor which pushes the energy demand growth, especially electricity demand growth, which is the rising temperatures, the heat waves around the world, in turn pushes the electricity demand growth, which in turn gives a push to, in some countries like China and India, coal consumption growth. Another point I would like to make is on oil. Electricity is important, but oil is still the most important strategic commodity as far as the energy markets are concerned. The year 2024 is very important for oil forecasters, for institutions around the world that look at the oil markets closely. Mid-2023, my colleagues in the oil market division came up with a forecast for 2024 that the global oil demand growth will slow down and the growth for 2024 will be less than 1 million barrels per day. And this was, to be very frank, an outlier when you look at the other forecasters, financial institutions, banks, think tanks, some international institutions. Most of them were saying almost 2 million barrels per day for 2024. And it remained like that. And I have checked several times with my colleagues, are you sure less than 1 MBD? Such prestigious institutions still say it's about 2 or close to 2, because for 1 year, 100% difference is a big difference. They insisted on these numbers. And today, when we look at the final 2024 oil demand growth, it was less than 1 million barrels per day. It was about close to 0.9 million barrels per day. So kudos to my colleagues on that. And it is something that we all need to learn from this example. Stick to data, stick to the realities. Of course, oil is and will stay in the many years to come as a strategic commodity for the energy markets. But as a result of the slowdown of oil demand growth, we see for the first time the share of oil in the global energy mix went below 30%. This is mainly, dear colleagues, driven by China. Because in the last 10 years, China alone was responsible more than 60% of global oil demand growth. And Chinese economy is slowing down and changing its nature, becoming lighter, plus the penetration of electric cars meant Chinese oil demand growth is very slow. If you take out the petrochemical sector consumption, China's oil demand is almost flat. So we will see the implications of that in the next years to come. Now, another important is oil. Another important fossil fuel is natural gas. We have seen that the natural gas demand is also very strong, and our numbers in the Global Energy Review says that the global gas demand increased last year about 115 BCM. Compared to historical averages, it is significantly higher, and it is mainly driven by providing input to electricity generation. Dear colleagues, I talk about the electricity, oil, gas, and nuclear renewables. I would like to mention one other item before concluding my remarks, which is the emissions. Global emissions last year increased less than 1%, but still did increase. If we want to find the silver lining, we see that there is a continuous decoupling of economic growth from emissions growth. So it is this decoupling is now cemented last year, even though global economy increased in a healthy way, global emissions growth was less than 1%, less than what we have seen before. And this is mainly as a result of the increasing share of renewables, stronger nuclear penetration, and the increasing number of electric cars and other technologies. Dear colleagues, to finish, again, this is data. And again, we say at the IEA, data always wins. And when we look at the data and the global energy picture, especially the geopolitical uncertainties increasing day by day, I think we have all the reasons to remember the IES core mission, energy security, how important it is, and it will remain to be very important. But energy security evolves. There are traditional energy security concerns, like oil and gas, and there are also new energy security concerns, risks coming. So therefore, we have decided to hold a Future of Energy Security Summit this year in April in London, together with the UK government, bringing all the governments, energy industry, academia, researchers together to understand the current, today's, and tomorrow's energy security challenges and how we can cooperate internationally to address those problems. Perhaps I should here thank Sir Keir Starmer, Prime Minister of UK, for holding and attending this summit, and also Secretary of State Ed Miliband for the great cooperation between IEA and the UK government, bringing many governments and other stakeholders together. With this, I would like to thank once again my colleague Lara Cozy and her great team to bring this wealth of data together in an objective way to provide a basis for discussions for the governments and beyond. Over to you, Laura.
Thank you very much, Thank you very much, Dr. Birol, for this introduction. I will take you now through some of the key findings of this Global Energy Review that gives us a picture of what happened in 2024 for all fuels, for all technologies, and for all regions. I would like really to invite all of you, actually, we are publishing today not only the entire report, but really a trove of statistical data, and I invite you all to go and look at it for yourself. So let us start with where Dr. Birol started. How much did global energy demand rise globally last year? And it was indeed a very healthy growth, 2.2%. Is this a lot? Is it little? So if you compare it with the average over the past decade, it's a very healthy growth. Over the past decade, we had an average growth of around 1.3%, and now in 2024, 2.2%. So let's try to understand the components and the reasons of this growth. So if we compare with GDP, energy demand grew a bit less than GDP, although, as Dr. Birol mentioned, a healthier economic growth last year, a bit above what we had over the past decade, definitely contributed to the healthy increase in energy demand. But if you want to find one reason, here you have it, is really electricity. Electricity grew very strongly, grew well above GDP, and there are very clear reasons why that happened. First is our economies are increasingly becoming dependent to electricity through digitalization. First and foremost, we have had very robust growth in investments in data centers, for example. The second reason is that electricity using equipment, from electric vehicles to heat pumps to all of sorts of things that we are using to electrify our economies, are growing in a very, very healthy manner, and it was the case in 2024 too. And third, as Dr. Birol mentioned, 2024 broke a lot of records in terms of weather, certainly in terms of record temperatures, extremes, and those really also helped through cooling needs to push up electricity demand. So if you understand how this worked, actually a very simple number, a very clear number, electricity demand and what we needed to produce this electricity demand actually accounted for 70% of the increase in total energy demand. So what did we use to fuel all this additional demand. You can see here, actually, all of the fuels grew. Very clearly, renewables led the way in meeting this additional demand growth, followed by natural gas, then coal, oil, and nuclear. So we see all of the fuels contributing to this demand growth. Maybe two additional points before moving to which regions contributed to the growth. First, if you look by fuels, temperatures played a particularly important role for one fuel, coal. As Dr. Birol explained, very high temperatures, especially China, India, Southeast Asia, where the electricity sector is still heavily reliant on coal. Actually, these very high temperatures explain nearly all of the growth in coal use. And second, maybe another notable thing is if we look, here is a primary energy view for those of you that are expert, and if you look at solar and how much solar contributed to the growth in demand is as much as oil increased in 2024, and this is certainly a first. So which countries contributed to the growth? Here you see it very clearly. Emerging market and developing economies accounted for 80% of the growth in demand. You have countries going very fast. This is the case for India, Southeast Asia in general. So the fastest growth, it really moved to Asia. China slowed down very significantly, but China energy use is huge. It's more than a quarter of global energy demand. So even small percentage changes, less than 3%, make a huge difference in terms of volumes. So China slowed down, just as a small reminder, at the beginning of the year 2000s, China was growing at around 8% a year, the following decade around 4% a year, and last year was less than 3%. And finally, Dr. Birol mentioned this already, advanced economies, both the United States and European Union, came back to growth last year on the wake of very strong electricity demand in both cases. So if we go by fuels now, Dr. Birol mentioned about oil demand, and I think this shows very clearly after the very strong post-COVID rebound, driven by mobility, reopening of the economies, we saw very, very strong oil demand growth in 2023, a slowdown in 2022, a slowdown in 2023, and an even further slowdown in 2024. And if you compare it to the pre-COVID period, also a significant reduction compared to what we were seeing back then. Maybe very simply put, two key reasons for that. China's economy, we mentioned this already, is slowing, is changing. So if you compare simply 2024 to 2023, China's oil demand growth was a tenth of what we have seen in 2023. And the other key structural change that is happening around the world is really what's happening in road oil. In 2024, road oil demand stalled. We'll come back to this in a second. Electric vehicles are playing a very important role there. So you have now a very different picture when you look at gas. It's almost an opposite mirror picture there. Gas demand was above the average of the period 2009 to 2029. Gas has gone through very turbulent times, contraction in 2022, very high prices, a rebound in 2023, and very, very strong growth in 2024. Now, the growth has been very widespread geographically, but importantly, advanced economies return to growth. This is the case both for the United States and importantly, Europe. But where you see there, very, very strong growth in emerging markets and developing economies outside of China, where both industrial needs on one hand and electricity needs, which we touched upon already, grew very, very strongly. Now, what happened to technologies and clean energy technologies globally? This is a very simple chart to explain. Everything went up very strongly. we had the executive director giving you a sense of how strong the growth in renewables generation was, the 22nd record year in a row in terms of capacity addition. For solar is the 12th consecutive year in a row, but capacity sometimes don't give really the full picture of the extent of the magnitudes we are really talking about. The electricity generation from solar and wind renewables combined was 900 terawatt hours. Now, 900 terawatt hours, how much is that? Is the addition in 1 year would have been able to power the entire economy of Japan. And if you look at other sources, we need to accumulate 10 years of growth in coal or 8 years for gas to have a similar amount. So a very, very significant growth. And when you put it together with the record increase of 33% in nuclear, all those sources combined accounted for 80% of the electricity, the record electricity demand additions. So finally, we look at the electric vehicles. Dr. Birol mentioned that we had already at the start of last year, the oil demand trends correct. It's a similar case for a lot of other things, including electric vehicles, where we had already estimated that 1 in 5 cars globally sold in 2025 would have been electric. This is a very significant jump compared to 2019, when only 3% of the sales were electric. So, and this very big jump in electric vehicles is one that also explains what is happening in oil trends. Now, we conclude with emissions. So how much did emission grow? They grew 0.8%. So if you compare it with the energy demand, is a very significant decoupling. Demand was growing at 2.2%. So the reason is simple. We have seen a very large increase in renewables, in nuclear, in low emission technology. So, but if you take a longer view, what you're seeing is that, in fact, the last century, if you look at GDP and CO2, they were really rising hand in hand, 1-to-1. We started seeing a decoupling at the beginning of this century, where CO2 started growing more slowly compared than GDP. This trend was confirmed in the period of the past decade, and this year, last year actually, even a stronger decoupling. Let's understand this a bit better by region and the causes of that. First, there is a real absolute decoupling happening already in certain regions of the world, in particular advanced economies. Advanced economies have been seeing a declining trends in emissions for several years, and we are now at levels of emissions that advanced economies had 50 years ago, with an economy 3 times larger. We see emissions slowing down very significantly in China. China grew, we said, around 3%, but the emission, the energy growth was 3%, and emission grew only 0.4%. This goes back again to something Dr. Birol mentioned. The Chinese economy is transforming, and over half of the growth in Chinese energy was actually clean energy. And finally, we're seeing other emerging countries and developing economies continuing to see emission growth, but at a slower rate than GDP. Now, at the root cause of this decoupling, there is one simple thing, and is the deployment of clean energy technologies. It's solar, wind, electric vehicles, heat pumps, and so on. So if you look at the amount of emissions we put in the atmosphere, the increment from 2024 to 2023 was around 300 million tons. And if you ask how much it would have been if we did not have all this clean energy technology in the system, it would have been 2.6 gigatons more. So the root cause of this decoupling we're seeing in some cases, emissions going down, in some other cases, emissions decoupling from GDP is the rollout of clean energy technologies. With this, I would really invite you to go and look at the report and the data, and just pass it back to Jethro. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura, for the presentation. And we now have time to take some questions from journalists. So we invite the journalists in attendance to send your questions through the Q&A function of the Zoom if you haven't done so already. And do please mention your media outlet along with your question. We're now going to take a quick 2-minute break to give you a chance to enter your questions, and we'll be right back. And we'll get through as many of them as we can in the time we have. The first one is from Florence Jones of the Financial Times, Sustainable Views. She says the report shows a decoupling of emissions and economic growth due to the adoption of clean energy technologies. However, given the world is currently not on track to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees, is this decoupling happening quickly enough? And what needs to happen for adoption to speed up? And then in a similar vein, Lucy Pedrola from RSE Data News asks about clean technologies. Which ones are on track with net zero by 2050? Is it only solar? And then one more question in this vein comes from Matteo Civillini from Climate Home News. He says he says new low carbon energy sources are covering a significant portion, but not all of energy demand growth. Does this mean the energy transition has not actually started yet? When will renewables start displacing fossil fuels at a global level rather than adding to them? So there's three questions covering different angles of the emissions and clean tech trends, and I'll pass to Laura to take those.
So thank you, Jethro. So first of all, very clearly, if until emissions are rising, we will not be on track in reaching a net zero, and this is what happened last year. One important point to say, in addition to all the numbers we mentioned, is that actually half of the emission growth last year was very much weather related. What is on track and what isn't? So at COP28, there were a number of intermediate targets that were agreed upon, in particular on renewable energy capacity, tripling by 2030 and energy efficiency doubling by 2030. Maybe we can see with these recent trends, how are we doing vis-a-vis those goals? And very clearly for renewables, we are very, very close. We are at around 2.7 increase by 2030. So the capacity is really quite kind of matching what was agreed at COP28. Unfortunately, for what concerns energy efficiency, we are going a bit the other direction. So if we look at the trends for energy intensity last year, instead of a doubling, we have actually seen a halving. So there is really a part of the energy system that is really not moving fast enough. In terms of replacement and displacement of fossil fuels and whether the transition is happening, I think we need to go by sector, and clearly there is one area of the energy sector where the transition is moving very fast, and is the electricity sector. Last year, 80% of the demand was met by solar, wind, hydro, nuclear, and this did indeed displace part of coal and natural gas uses that would have been actually much stronger. So I mentioned the 2.6 gigaton that clean technologies are avoiding in the atmosphere. Those is all fossil fuel that is actually being displaced.
Thank you very much, Laura. Next question comes from Robert Hodgson of Euronews. He says, Dr. Birol notes that oil remains the most important strategic commodity for energy markets. How do you gauge the current and future importance of critical raw materials? And are you concerned about the intensifying geopolitical tensions over access to supplies? We've also had a few questions about the US, United States, and what's happening there, from Junior Isles at the Energy Industry Times, from Harry Gould at Quantum Commodity Intelligence. I'll perhaps let the colleagues tell us what they know about what we're seeing in the data for the US. Are there any changes taking place there? And then also a question on oil markets. Obviously, Dr. Birol spoke a bit about that in his opening remarks, but what is the outlook for oil markets in 2025? So perhaps I can, for the critical minerals, Dr. Birol, you could perhaps speak a bit about that.
With pleasure. Now, you are completely right. Oil is today the most strategic energy commodity. But as IEA has highlighted since year 2021 continuously, critical minerals are becoming by day very important in the energy business. And it is the copper, it is the lithium, it is the platinum, it is the cobalt. And we are seeing that the many countries around the world are having contracts, trade agreements for the mining of these important critical minerals and the rare earths. And as a result of that, currently, we see a concentration of the mining in a few number of countries. But it's not all. We also see that the refining and processing of these critical minerals, they are also concentrated very, very much. In the energy world, we believe a magic word. I have a magic word, which is diversification, in order to reduce the risks. So we see that both the mining and the refining and processing of critical minerals they are all concentrated, and there is a need to a diversification for mining and refining and processing, and B, maybe there are ways to increase the efforts for recycling of the use of these critical minerals. Otherwise, we are going to see serious challenges. For example, our latest analysis on copper highlights the very fact that around 2030, if we look at the copper demand coming from the energy sector and the mining and processing FID taken investment projects around 2030, we see a significant deficit of supply for copper. And if we consider that a mining project for copper from A to Z, the lead time is about 17 years on average, it is a major challenge. So it is one of the reasons why I said the energy security today is not only the focusing on oil and gas. These are very important, but at the same time, tomorrow's, such as critical minerals, it is the reason, like we make our oil market review, gas market review, electricity market review, we are publishing each year regularly on a critical minerals market review.
Thank you very much, Dr. Birol. And perhaps I can turn to Laura to tell us a little bit about what the trends are we're seeing in the US.
Thank you very much, Jethro. So the growth in energy we have seen last year in 2024 is significant. It was the third largest after China and India in terms of volumes. Very significant pickup compared to recent trends. And the reason is a very healthy growth, especially in electricity and electricity demand. So sources that were used to create this additional electricity demand were mostly renewables and natural gas that actually accounted for most of the growth in energy use in the US in 2024. Now, what were the reasons behind this significant pickup in electricity use? Several. The economy was one. Second was temperatures, as we have mentioned already earlier. And third is digitalization, AI, data centers, very significant investments happening in several states in the United States, where we are seeing new data centers.
Thank you, Laura. And now I'll pass to Dr. Birol for the final question on oil markets. We've talked a bit about what we saw last year, but what do we expect to see this year?
Okay. So in terms of demand, our colleagues who were spot on last year in terms of the oil demand growth globally, this year expect the oil demand can grow about 1 million barrels per day. And in terms of production, they expect a strong growth coming from Americas, US, Canada, Brazil, Guyana, and also from Argentina. In fact, the biggest growth comes from US. To complement what my colleague Laura Cosi just said, US, all these energy sources are growing in the United States. And this growth we expect around 1.5 million barrels per day. As such, normally we expect supply growth will be higher than the demand growth. But there are at least two uncertainties here. One, what will be the policies of the OPEC plus countries, production policies? We have to wait and see. And the second one is of course, geopolitical uncertainties, including the impact of trade policies, if any, on these trends. But normally, looking at the supply and demand as of today, we expect an oversupply of oil markets, and is such a comfortable 2025 as far as the oil markets are concerned.
Thank you very much. And that's all we have time for. We've actually gone over time covering as many questions as we can. And if there are any journalists who have questions that didn't get answered during the Q&A, do please reach out to our press office and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. So I'd just like to say thank you very much again to Dr. Birol and Laura for the presentations and the answers. Thank you to the journalists for all the great questions. And thank you to everyone following online for your interest in our work. As I mentioned, the full report is available to read and download on our website, so do please take a look. And with that, thank you and goodbye.